guys, welcome back to the Beloved and Lowly podcast. I am your host, Janaea Eve Watson, and today I'm going to be talking to y'all a little bit about going through our childhoods, particularly through school, sharing some of my experiences, what it was like being mistreated, trying to figure out who you are and how the world works, learning about, yourself and the things and people around you, figuring out what you like, and how it can be difficult to do that, or how it can be impacted to do that when you're going through bullying, mistreatment, isolation, people treating you indifferently, or ultimately not even it being an outside impact, but sometimes an internal impact, and that maybe you don't know who you are, maybe you don't know what you're doing, you don't have answers to questions people are asking you. And honestly, I face that still in college. They ask me, why am I studying the degree that I am? Why do I want to be this thing when I'm older? And sometimes I have to be honest with myself and not be quick to just say something right off the bat because I'm not quite sure. And sometimes that's just the answer. I don't know. And so when you're growing up, a lot of those questions can be, what do you like to do? Or what do you want to be? Or where do you want to go next? Goodness, I mean, after high school, people are trying to figure out, okay, we've graduated, so what's the next step? What school am I going to get into? Do I want to go to this school? Or do I even want to go to school again? What job am I going to get? Where am I going to interview? Why? All of these things. We are just hit with all of these questions. And then even before then, I know I'm working a little backwards, college, then high school. In middle school, it's the questions of, okay, who are my friends? What kind of person do I want to be? What do I believe? What do I think about certain things? What do I want to partake in or participate in? And then, you've got elementary school. It's very elementary, but there are mean kids. There are teachers who shape, your experience sometimes all the way throughout high school if you stay, or throughout school if you stay with the same kids from elementary through high school. The adults can play a big role in your overall experience of school, but not even being in the school building, being at home, what happens at home, it can really shape it. What happens at home has the potential to shape what goes on outside of the home. And so today or actually it's tonight. It is currently 11:34 p.m. And this was the time I could do the podcast, and I I really felt like it needed to be done tonight. And I was thinking about a lot of different topics, but this one just feels right for this week. And so, school, growing up, being a kid, and then all of a sudden not being a kid and figuring things out. And then, all the emotional and external and even internal turmoil that goes along with those things. Those are going to be the topics of the evening. And so I'm going to start by prefacing this episode with kind of my heart behind this podcast in a very quick summary. For those who are new, thank you so much for watching. I'm glad you're here. I hope that you get something out of it, and I hope that you enjoy. Thank you for watching, or thank you for listening. So my heart behind this podcast is not really to teach. Sometimes I'll throw in some tidbits of things that I'll look up, or I'll make a little bit more of an outline if it's something that I think is important to include and I need to plan for. But it's not necessarily to teach more than it is to share my experiences and ultimately share what has anchored me in these experiences of my life, which has ultimately been God. And so that's why, in the bio of the Instagram, you can find It's like walking through life anchored by Christ, I believe is how it's written. And what I mean by that is, the things I wanted to talk about on this podcast, it's just going through life, like even as a Christian, even as somebody who follows Jesus, who is faith-based, who, believes, I still go through things, and I want to, like, things that are not always easy or lollipops and rainbows or enjoyable, like Jesus was lowly and a man of sorrows. And I really, with this podcast, wanted to emphasize that as faith based people or people who follow Christianity or follow Jesus and live out Christianity, we can still go through things. We can still have hard times, and I wanted to talk about those hard times, but talk about how God has helped me through them and how I've navigated getting through them and getting to the place where I am now, where I can stand strong in who I am. For the most part, I know who and whose I am. I know my worth. I'm aware of the world to a degree where I can, kind of come up with my perceptions and my thought processes and the way that I want to live my life. I've come to a point where, I'm still growing, I'm still learning, and we always will be. I actually talked about that in the very first episode I did on here, but ultimately I'm at a place where I have confidence I didn't used to and an understanding of life that I didn't used to. And I think at the points where I didn't have those, it would have been nice to hear from a bigger sister that I never had because I was an only child, or, it's just an encouraging voice, someone on YouTube, a podcast, anyone or any kind of resource that could help encourage me, that could also say, I've walked through something similar or I've gone through this, and not feel so alone in the struggle or so alone in, this thing that may seem atypical for me to go through because I follow Christ, or because I went to a certain kind of school, or because I grew up this way. It doesn't really matter your background. Sometimes you just go through things, and I wanted to share that. And so I hope that kind of relayed well, but ultimately, it's more of a reflection and a telling about my journey, my experiences, so that I can hopefully help to be a person who's a light, but also someone you can relate to, and a friend, honestly. So, okay, let's get into this. So I'm actually going to start with a bit of scripture. I knew I wanted to start with scripture. I wasn't quite sure. I was going between Exodus, the story of Moses when he was telling God that he was not eloquent in speech and he didn't know how to talk to the people. And then also scriptures that talk about like going through hard things. And I think I ended up landing on going through the hard things because it was a little bit more relevant, or it hit a little bit more close to home when I'm talking about this particular subject of like going through struggles in school. And so I'm going to be in James. It's James 1 verse 2, and this is the ESV version. Count it all Okay, I'm going to start that over. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. I'm just going to say this because it's the first thing I think of, that last part, perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. That can be so hard to believe or understand or comprehend. And I'm not going to try to decipher it because I haven't had time to really think through it on a deep level. I just knew that I wanted to read something that basically confirmed that we were going to go through difficult things in our lives. But ultimately, that can be hard to think of, like, perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. I mean, we are imperfect beings and we're sinful in nature, and we lack a lot, and we mess up a lot. We fall short, we sin, those things. And so it's encouraging to read that, because we see that it's possible some way, shape, or form, and it's sweet. But ultimately, the count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. We will meet trials of various kinds. We will meet trials. We will face the music. We will have difficult moments, days, feelings, people, jobs, careers, school, assignments. We're going to have hard stuff. But it says to count it all joy. And that's I would say particularly, well, maybe not even particularly in this culture, but I would say certainly in this culture, trials and joy are contradictory. We like ease. I mean, we're the generation of artificial intelligence. Things like ChatGPT did not used to exist, and they do now, and they make our lives so much quote unquote easier in certain ways. And we like to do the things that we like to do, and it doesn't seem that hard labor it's appreciated, but maybe not to the degree that it used to be, or it's enjoyable, but not to nearly as many people as it used to be. And that can look like a lot of different things. And it's not just about labor or working or, any of that. It can be a lot of different things, but ultimately, to count our trials as joy is something I think you really have to be intentional about. Because, and honestly, in my experience, it's taken my faith to get me there, because counting those things that you're going through, super rough, they're testing you as a human, they're testing you as a person, they're testing your character, they're testing your patience, they're testing you. It can be hard to count that as joy, something to enjoy, enjoyable. Like, trials seems like there's such a negative connotation on trials, but such a positive connotation on joy. It's interesting, the encouragement to align the two. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect. So steadfastness gets us to the full effect of being perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And I'm going to kind of sit on that one, on verse 3. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. So we know where steadfastness gets us, and we know that we're meant to count our trials as joy. Now, in the middle is where the work happens. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. You ever feel tested? Okay, for example, you're waking up early. You're trying to get to a class or to a job. You're running 5 minutes behind, but you know that if you go exactly the speed limit, because I'm not going to encourage speeding, but if you go exactly the speed limit and you take the back way and you know that this light is yellow for so long, so you're able to go through it while it's still yellow, and it still be yellow and not be red, and you just know that you can get there on time. But then someone turns in front of you off of another side road, and they get in front of you, and they're the car that make you have to stop at the light because it turns red instead of staying yellow. Like a situation like that. Or a situation like, what else tests what else tests you? Like, someone who might be just being mean, or treating you not so kindly, and they're testing your patience or your ability to stay calm. They're just coming at you. Or someone is being really loud and you don't know them, and you're in a public vicinity and you're just trying to eat your food, and you're in a food court and they're just being super obnoxious and loud down the way. You can't really do anything about it, and that's testing your patience to not say anything, or it's testing your patience or testing just you because you're feeling some kind of turmoil inside, some kind of trial inside of you where it's like, oh, I just wish they would not be so quiet. I wish they'd be considerate of the area around them. Situations that happen that are out of our control or that are around us, those tend to be the testings or the tests. And you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. So I'm going to get into the school piece now. I think this is a way of life. Goodness, the Bible, honestly, not even the Bible. Having a relationship with Christ, having a relationship with God got me through high school, brother. Man, COVID changed like everything. So let me explain. I was quite extroverted all throughout school up until COVID. COVID happened, and then I realized, oh, I really didn't really, I really didn't really, I really don't have any friends, like at school at least. And there was no reaching out or concern that I remember, and ultimately there was a returning. I returned to school after, having worn the masks and having gone through just school online for a year and a half. It was about that time. And I returned and I was just so much more secluded, but it also had to do with the fact that friend groups were made that I was not a part of because other people had started going to school before I did, started going back to school. But also, as I grew up, as you grow up, things start to fall off of you. Like you don't align with certain things anymore, or you start leaning more towards this way. You just err certain directions, and other directions you just completely shy away from because you just simply don't connect with them anymore. Well, that is how it was when I went back to school. But it turned into some kind of, unfortunately, it felt like a lot of judgment, and like towards me. I felt a lot of anxiety, and it festered into a lot of fear and dislike between both sides. And so getting through high school was one of the hardest things, not because I was being bullied. I went through that in elementary school, and I'll get to that, but because I was so isolated and alone. I felt disconnected and like no one understood, and that I was like stuck in this place for hours on end with these people who did not like me and who it just wouldn't budge. It'd be like there would be one good day every few weeks or something, or like one good moment, like one smile or a wave, or like one genuine kindness or something like that. But it happened so rarely that it was a pain to go to school. I would pull up to school, my mom would be dropping me off, and my heart would just start racing. I mean, we weren't even at the front of the line for her to drop me off yet, and I would just be so anxious. I mean, I'd be sweating and my heart racing. I'm trying to take deep breaths. Like I'd have full on, almost, not full on, definitely not full on, I don't think, but I would have at least miniature, I would rightly say anxiety attacks every day, at least in senior year. It was very sad. I almost transferred schools if it were not for the scholarship rules, because if you graduate Val or Sal, which I did, woot woot, praise God, then you get a certain scholarship to another university, or you get scholarships to like the state and to also a particular university. And anyway, it felt like I needed to stick it out, and thank God I did, but it was one of the hardest things that I did. But my point is, it was this kind of lifestyle I had to acquire and like put on myself. You know how we're meant to like put on the armor of God. We're meant to, put on certain things on ourselves, like biblically speaking, because we're called to live certain ways, be certain ways. And ultimately, this is kind of a lifestyle I had to attain, or a mentality I had to put on myself. And for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And then we know that steadfastness gets us to, in its full effect, yields perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And so every day it was a prayer. Every day there was a prayer. Every day there was a moment with God, an intentional moment, and it would be relative to school. And I'd just pray that he'd keep me going and that I could keep going and that I would get through it. And the days were long and hard and sad and anxiety filled, but the way I got through was praying, and the way that I got through was putting on these things, these biblical things, particularly the keeping in mind the outcome of putting on these things. So like fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. If you practice those things, I know that the outcome is for good. Or if I let the testing of my faith happen instead of stepping into the easier thing, instead of moving to the other school, or instead of, lashing out and just being absurd, or instead of, doing something that is out of character or out of line, I can let the testing of my faith happen. I can let them, I'm going to say this and it might sound sad, but let them stare. Let them give me glares. Let them look at me like I'm less than. Let them not smile back. Let them walk ahead and not include me. Let them talk about me in front of my face and not say anything. Let them, whatever it is, whatever it might be. If you just let them, and then you let the testing of your faith happen, you let the testing of your faith produce steadfastness. Well, the more that I let it happen, and I'm not saying let people walk all over you, but what I am saying is the only thing in life you can control is yourself, and you have to consider the kind of person that you want to be, the kind of things you want to say, do, how you want to respond, how you want to react. And for me, it worked best to stay on my own, be kind if intervention did happen, if someone says something, or if, whatever it was, and ultimately to keep the end goal in mind. This being the end goal, praise God. And so I noticed that the more I let the testing of my faith happen and produce the steadfastness, the easier it was to not just get through the day, but also to see their brokenness, to see that they need love, to see that they need truth, to be considerate, to love them, to see them the way Jesus did. And I'm going to be completely honest. It probably took up until my last 2 months of being at that school where I really saw like a ray of sunlight like beaming into the window, or I saw that bit of hope, the glimpse of hope, and I just clung to it. I was like, graduation's so close. But it took until then for me to start having these better understandings of those around me. It took a while, but the prayer every day, I think, is what got me there. Because it wasn't just going to be a flip of a switch. Today I'm anxious filled. I'm not okay. I'm not being treated fairly. I'm not enjoying where I'm at. I'm very unhappy. And I only see this as a trial. I see no joy. And then the next day, the next day, I just, you know, can see them for how Jesus sees them. Basically, it took more than just one day for it to be, okay, me how I see them, and then me how Jesus sees them. Or seeing how I see them in the flesh versus seeing them how Jesus would see them. And anyway, it was those end results that got me through. School was hard in its entirety for me until I got to college. And I don't say that to be discouraging. I actually say it to be encouraging, to say, like, keep going. It's going to make you stronger. Get through those first 12 years. Do it, loves. Y'all have got it. You can. And your story, it will look different than mine. I don't say it might, I say it will, because we're completely different people with different lives and different scenarios. And so you do what you're meant to do. But my encouragement would be to keep going and to lean on faith. That would be my encouragement. Lean on faith, lean on the end goals. The days can be hard, but the end is worth it. And I'm telling you, if you work on building your character, if you work on being the person you want to be and are trying to be and are growing and becoming into, you're going to look back and you're going to be proud of yourself, not just for having kept going, but for having kept going and staying true to who you are. That was a difficulty I think I faced going through school. Like, I certainly actually faced going through school. I wasn't a yes girl. Like, I didn't say yes to everything, like every invitation or every idea. Like, let's go do this or let's hang out this place. And I think maybe I said no so many times to where I just stopped being invited to things, which is okay, you know. Sometimes it didn't feel that way. Sometimes I just felt like I was being kicked to the curb and I didn't know why, because I wasn't like being mean or anything. But I think at the end of the day, it came down to, you know, your morals, your ethics, your values, your compass, your, you know, internal alignment and what it aligns with and what it doesn't. And at the end of the day, I just really didn't align with a lot of those around me. And so, I didn't have the high school privilege of, you know, enjoying being like in relation with those who were around me. And that was just a long, weary time. It was very weary and very uncomfortable and quite sad. But I was one who I didn't say yes to everything, and I'm so glad I didn't. Because I could have had the temporary pleasure of partaking in certain things that I chose not to, and I think it would have left me more broken, more confused, more likely to stray away from the things that I know I want to align with me, because, you know, I would have chosen to step away from it once. You know, maybe I would choose to step away from it again. And by it, I mean, you know, what I believe, what my values are, the kind of person I want to be, what I want to portray, how I want to come across, you know, those kinds of things. I think a lot of my actions were led by how I wanted to look back on myself in the future. And that helped me a lot. Looking back, I'm proud of the strength, and I think he will be too. But something that like set me apart was faith for sure. I get closer to God every moment that I spend near with him, I believe. You know, the more you read his word, the more you get to know his character. The more you pray, the closer you are to his heart. The more you get in the spirit and worship, the more, you know, connected that you feel. And that's just my experience, but that's how it was, or how it's been. And so like I've grown closer to the Lord 100%, and I think I walk out my faith a little bit more than I think before I would say it a little bit more than I walked it out. And now I'm able to walk it out more because of honestly the things I've gone through, the pain I've gone through, some of the hurt, some of the lessons, um, and ultimately realizing that God is ultimate. I know I've said ultimate a lot, but He is ultimate, and He is worth it, and He is, it makes all the sense that He would be my complete reason for living, being, breathing, and that I would want to align my life with His word, that's in this form, this beautiful form. And so, I don't know. I don't know where I was at, but essentially, I didn't I didn't always smile was a big one, which I've talked about before too. I didn't always smile, and a lot of people would think or like assume that I was unhappy or didn't like them or was not glad or whatnot. And I think I've always been that way, not just with the smiling, but with the just body language or how I act or my countenance or my interests, my questions, my patterns, habits, like what people might have thought was weird or, like socially unacceptable. I didn't mind doing because it was just me being me, and I felt like somebody had to do it. Somebody had to be themselves. And honestly, it's very hard for me to fake it. It makes me like it does this inside of my like right here in my chest. It's like when I'm trying to be oh, and for those listening, it's like a scrunch. I'm like scrunching at my heart. But basically it I can't, faking and lying and, being someone or something I'm not, I literally, I can't. It, it doesn't work. And so, there is always room for growth and development. And that is something I had to like grow up and learn and realize like, okay, hun, you being authentic is not always the best thing. Sometimes you need to learn, you need to grow up, you need to change some things about yourself because you're not perfect and there is room for getting better. And, you know, I used to be a little prideful in how I was. I'd just be like, this is just me being me. And if you have a problem with it, then you have the problem, not me. And I think there are certainly times where I had the problem. I absolutely had the problem, or maybe we both had the problems. But I certainly had problems sometimes where it was like, okay, Janaea, like looking back, I'm like, you need to step back, and like basically basically just grow up. Sometimes just come with time, but that's kind of how my personality was. And I think that was one of the reasons I didn't have a lot of friends, because I didn't follow a lot of trends and I didn't do what was always cool, and I didn't like just sit around. I don't have the memories of being with groups of people and just doing everything that they were doing or talking about the things they were talking about or being interested in the same stuff, because that just wasn't me. Um, and that was something, I'm going to get to the adults. I'm going to go ahead and get to the adults. That was something that some adults appreciated. Some adults appreciated, and I'm grateful for them. I'm grateful that they saw my heart, even if I was in the wrong sometimes. I didn't back down from, being mistreated, someone else being mistreated, or someone trying to like call me on something that I was actually in the right on, or, anything like that. There were certain adults who appreciated my, my, I don't know how I want to say this. Basically, my quality of, there's a word, but I don't want to say it. It's not the right word. My strength. I'll say that. Appreciated my strength. Um, and for that, for those adults, I'm so very grateful. So very grateful because they helped me not feel like I was crazy. They helped me not feel like I was just this weirdo or this one who was unwanted. That was a big word. That was, oh, if there was one word that could sum up my, ooh, I am not getting emotional. Okay. If there was one word that could sum up my school experience, 1st through 12th grade, I would say it would be the word unwanted, which is really sad. But also, I learned a lot. I learned a lot. So I'm going to talk about the adults. So thank you to those who encouraged me through. And to those, I'm not even going to give a message to those. I'm just going to tell y'all what the sitch was. So it it there were other professors, not professors, not at that point, teachers, other teachers. I have professors now, so I'm like, no, differentiation. Um, teachers who, or adults who just like, it seemed like they despised me, or they thought I was despicable, or they thought I was like, I don't even know. I can't. Like when adults kind of villainize children, it's sad to me because children are still children. They're young and learning, becoming, growing, trying, figuring everything out. And as sometimes they're headstrong and sometimes they're different from the like, how do I even say that? Sometimes they're not all the same. And those who aren't the same as the majority, particularly, if they're penalized for their being different, it's so sad to me. And I felt like I was one of those, just for being myself. And it's just sad because it also carries into like how you build your relationships, your friends, those around you, those who are getting to know you. You go into things or places, you go into a room at a new event or a new place, like a new church or a new small group or a new group of friends, and you go in thinking, oh, somebody's probably not going to like me, so you don't go in with the confidence that maybe you could have if somebody would have edified you or encouraged you rather than villainized you when you were younger and trying to figure things out, Um, There are a lot of times I remember, and I did this, oh my goodness, I've done this since I was in kindergarten, walking out of classes. I don't think I've done it in college because I haven't had a reason. Thank God for amazing professors. So grateful for my college experience, y'all. Yeah, that's probably gonna come up in this podcast, because man, the drastic difference has been beautiful. So grateful. But yeah, I don't really know where I was, but just be mindful. Um, be mindful if you're older or if you have any kind of impact on a child that is like you're teaching them or you're being an older adult figure to them. Just be mindful um, that they are young. And if you are young, or if you're going through school, no matter what place you're at right now, K through 12, even in college, take heart. The Bible says that. It actually says, "Take heart, for I have overcome the world," and that was in reference to Jesus. I have overcome the world. He already won. But that's big picture. Looking at our picture right now, though, this point in time, take heart. The time will pass, and you'll be in a new season of life. Maybe not before you know it. I'm not going to sit here and say, the time will fly. It may not always fly. It may be something you have to sit through and let your steadfastness be developed in, but it will pass. And the external, for the longest time it didn't. And I'm not going to promise that it will. Like it didn't for me, and I'm not going to promise that it will for you. But for the longest time, things didn't change. But I was able to go through the experience of school better. Not because of the circumstances around me, but because I worked on myself. And internally, I was intentional about becoming and becoming good things. So, those are just some words of encouragement for y'all. Is there anything else? I don't think so. I think that's it for this evening. But I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. I certainly did. It was a great reflection, great time of talking. And if you are interested in continuing listening to this podcast, some of the episodes, stories, things I have to share, whatnot, you can find the Beloved and Lowly podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and then I post clips on Instagram as well. You can also find my personal page on Instagram if you're interested in looking at that. It's in the bio of the Beloved and Lowly podcast Instagram. Forgive me, I'm getting a little slower because it's getting late, but this was a great time, great talk, and I also have a place for prayer requests in the highlights section of the Instagram. Be sure to, if you'd like, you can leave a comment if you related to anything in this video, or if there's anything you want to share. Anything you're interested in, maybe learning about me, or have questions, just feel free in the comment section, and subscribe, follow, like all the things to hopefully help this podcast to get out and be shared to more if you feel that it is share worthy. So thanks y'all. Thanks y'all for being here, and I will see y'all next time. Bye, you guys.